On a lighter note, the Bengals, of course, played a football game yesterday, and I think there's plenty of reason to be optimistic about some of the things that we saw on the football field for the Cincinnati Bengals. They lose the football game, obviously. That's 4 games in a row, and I don't think people that play, players, coaches, I don't think they're in a spot where they can sit there and say, oh, there's a silver lining or there's moral victories. I don't think as a player or as a coach or as an executive they can afford to do that, because to them they lost their 4th straight game, and that is flat out unacceptable, and that simply can't happen. But for us here as fans, I think it is appropriate to be able to sit here and have a bit of a silver lining for how things transpired on the football field. Obviously, the first half, nothing happened offensively in the first half. 4 drives, 3 of them, you're going 3 and out, only the 1 first down. And those were the first, before the final drive, where they tried to kick the 67-yard field goal. We'll touch about that in a second. But the first 4, 3 of them were 3 and outs, and the 1, you had the 1 first down to Tee Higgins. You couldn't get anything going, right? We talked about, wanting some creativity offensively. You weren't able to do that, right, at the beginning of the game. How often have we seen a little end around to Jamar Chase at the very beginning of a game and it go for negative yards? I feel like we've done that song and dance several times with the Cincinnati Bengals. It simply doesn't work. Kind of a Zach Taylor special there. Just hand it to Jamar Chase on the end around, and he'll lose a few yards, and that'll get us headed in the right direction. Obviously, they had to try to run the football early in the game, right? With the quarterback that had just joined the team on Tuesday, they desperately needed to try to figure out how to run the football. There was nothing creative as it related to the run game. It was just, we'll line up under center here, we'll turn around, we'll hand the football off, and we'll see what happens. And obviously, that didn't end up working very well for the Cincinnati Bengals early on in that game. The offensive line, it was bad, especially early. It's a unit that really has struggled for Cincinnati. It has all season long. And Joe Flacco clearly didn't trust what he saw early in the game. I mean, they weren't holding up at all. And they got better. I would give them credit. As the game went on, they got better. But really, he got the ball, he was dropping back, and he was under siege, and there really wasn't much he could do there in that spot. So the offense, about as bad as you could get to begin the game. However, didn't turn the football over. They were punting the ball at the beginning of the game, and Jake Browning, of course, over the course of the past several weeks, he wasn't punting the ball all the time. He was throwing it to the other team there as well, and because Joe Flacco didn't make any mistakes early on when clearly nothing was going their way on offense, they had an opportunity to hang around in the football game. Defense in the first half played really, really well, right? We'll talk about, what happened in the second half, but defense in the first half did a tremendous job, right? That's a really good offense there in Green Bay, and they were coming off a tie, or a loss, a tie, and then a bye. So they were rested, and there was lots of reason for them to want to get after it, push the football down the field, and score a lot of points. And he did a great job of only holding them to 10 points in the first half. DJ Turner, I thought, played the game of his career to this point. He was everywhere. He was tremendous. Hopefully he can stay healthy. In the past, he's had some of these games where it looks like he's playing really well, and he's going to really take that next step and be a guy for him, and then he ends up getting hurt or not being able to take the football field for the Cincinnati Bengals team. Hopefully, fingers crossed, he can stay healthy here in the spot for Cincinnati. And, he had the tip on the interception. Geno Stone, right place at the right time. He hauls it in. I'll give him credit for that. But he had a couple of big hits in the game. But overall, Geno Stone missing tackles, not playing winning football. Certainly a liability there on the back end for Cincinnati. But several PBUs for DJ Turner. He was all over the place. And that was great to see. And also, the Bengals were able to get some pressure on Jordan Love without blitzing, right? They had some, just 4-man rushes where they were able to, flush him from the pocket. Now, Jordan Love did a tremendous job of using his legs. I think maybe that surprised Al Golden a little bit. Jordan Love's an incredible quarterback. He's a great athlete. You saw that. But I thought in the first half, they were able to get some pressure on him with only bringing 4. And, that really allowed them to, make some stops there on defense. They had the turnover. They were able to force a couple of punts. And, I thought they did a good job with that. Joseph Osai, I've been hard on him, but, he showed up in a big way, especially in the first half. He made some critical tackles, made some big TFLs there. And again, in the first half, they were limiting Green Bay a little bit there on the ground. And I thought they did a tremendous job, giving up 10 points to that offense in the first half and win the turnover battle 1-0. You take that absolutely 10 out of 10 times for the Cincinnati Bengals football team. Going back to the offensive side, there towards the end of the first half, you're like, okay, we got to see something here, because they had the one first down at the time. Like, I get we're backed up. I get there's not much time, but we have to figure something out. And there was a big run there from Chase Brown. Credit to Zach Taylor for sticking to the running game. I think they reaped the benefits of that a little bit. Had the big 10-yard run on that drive. They were able to find T and Jamar and just get it out where it's like, okay, we made some positive ground here, and we're hanging out around midfield going into the half. I've always wanted to see Evan McPherson attempt one of those, right? 67 yards would have been the NFL record had it gone in. Obviously, he made it, but LaFleur called timeout. Then he needed to make back-to-back 67-yard field goals. Unfortunately, that probably wasn't a highly likely chance that was going to take place. He misses, just didn't get all of it, right? It was short. Thankfully, it wasn't returned for a touchdown, right? And the Bengals go into half 10-0. By the way, I think that was the right call. Evan McPherson, clearly it was the right call. He made it the first time. And, that would have been a big momentum shift if you're able to hang three and then able to get the ball to start the second half. There was conversation about, do you do the Hail Mary, or do you try to kick the longest field goal in NFL history? I thought Taylor made the right call. Unfortunate. LaFleur, nice job calling the timeout, and they're not able to get 3 points there. But just that drive, able to at least lead to a 67-yard field goal attempt, you kind of felt like, okay, like at least we saw something, right? Like they got a couple of first downs. They moved the ball a little bit, and they're getting the ball here to start the second half, and it's only a 10-0 ball game, right? That feels a heck of a lot better than 14-0, right? And obviously it feels a lot better than some of the scores you faced over the course of the past few weeks. And you're like, okay, what are we going to do here with this opportunity? And then that drive to start the third quarter was excellent. Now, you're not going to be able to lean on that type of drive a ton going forward, right, because it took 10-plus minutes, 17 plays. That's a very taxing drive that takes a lot out of you, and I don't think you can be reliant on that being the way that you score all of these points. But, we'll take it, right, for the Cincinnati Bengals. Andre Iosivas had 3 drops in the football game. And, I've been a supporter in Yoshi, 6th-round guy. I like him, but, you can't have 3 drops in a National Football League game. Can't happen. And, it might be time to start to turn the page a little bit and get Tinsley out there a little bit more and Yoshi out there a little bit less, if that's going to be something that continues, especially without Joe Burrow, right? Because Yoshi's great with Joe Burrow, but without him, hasn't really done anything. And even in the first 2 games with him, didn't really do anything either. He was out on the field over 90% of the time in this game for Cincinnati. Had the 3 drops. Mitchell Tinsley obviously has popped. And seemingly every time you ask him to do something, he does it, and he does it at a high level. Maybe it's time to rethink that wide receiver 3 spot with Yoshi. But regardless, you're able to run the football a little bit there on that drive. You hit Jamar, you hit T. Then you find yourself in a goal-to-go situation inside the 1, and you false start. By the way, the Bengals played a really clean football game here. We detailed all the things that needed to go their way if they wanted to be competitive and win this game. Lots of things went their way, right? They win the turnover battle 1-0. I believe they only had 3 penalties in the game there as well. And those were things that needed to happen for them to have a chance. They did happen, and obviously they still ended up falling short. We talk about that false start a heck of a lot more if they don't score points there, but 4th and goal, great decision by Zach Taylor, by the way. He understood that he needed to get a touchdown there in that spot. 10-3 wasn't going to give you any life. You needed to go out there and get in the end zone. And how about Tanner Hudson coming up big? He does his version of the Lambeau leap. Bengals score, and it's like, whoa. Obviously it took 10 minutes, so now you only got a few minutes left here in the third quarter, and it's a 1-score game. You're like, all right, let's see what this team could do. And then, we talked about in the past, penalties certainly being an issue against Denver, and the turnovers a big problem against Detroit and against Minnesota. Well, what was the problem here for Cincinnati in this game, beyond the fact that you're trying to get a guy up to speed with your offense that just got here on a Tuesday? Well, the biggest thing that was off for Cincinnati in this game is they didn't play complementary football, right? That's something that people talk about all the time when they're talking about football at all levels. And, the defense played great in the first half. The offense was non-existent. The offense played great in the second half. The defense couldn't get a stop and couldn't get off the field when they needed to. And ultimately, that's what cost them this football game. Credit to Matt LaFleur. They clearly made some more adjustments in the second half. I think Love was kind of holding on to the ball a little bit there in the first half. They dialed up some stuff. The quick passing game really showed itself there for Green Bay in the second half, and they couldn't get off the field. Now, some people, I don't know why this storyline isn't being talked about enough, but from all what I've read and heard about over the course of the past few hours, certainly into the night last night and here this morning, is that, the defense really struggled and they couldn't get off the field and they needed to, and it ultimately just wasn't good enough. Let's not act like Trey Hendrickson was out there on the football field. This shouldn't be hard to realize why the defense struggled so much in the second half. Yeah, they have holes. Yeah, they need to be better overall, and we know that they have holes, but you take away the guy that was the runner-up for the Defensive Player of the Year and you remove him in the second half, it's going to be really bad, and that's what you saw here in this game. So my biggest concern, and obviously we all have a bunch of concerns going into this short week against Pittsburgh, but is 91 going to be able to play? Because if he can't play, that's a massive, massive deal for Cincinnati. And if you look at the down in which Green Bay was having a ton of success in the second half, it was third down. That's when Trey Hendrickson obviously shows up and he does what he does. But, yeah, they weren't able to pressure the quarterback there, get home in the second half, no Trey Hendrickson. And Jordan Love obviously made him pay in the process. And another storyline, of course, is that Logan Wilson was benched. Didn't play really in the second half, and they went with Barrett Carter, the rookie. And, I think Barrett Carter had shown some good things, but I want to be very clear, I think this is a mistake. I think Al Golden, to me, clearly, I feel good about this hire. If Zach Taylor can hang on to his job, which we'll see if he's able to do that, but if he can, Al Golden's going to be back, and that's going to be a good thing for the Cincinnati Bengals defense. I truly do believe that. But I don't understand, this thing with Logan Wilson here. I get it that he has lost a step. I get it he has seemingly aged quickly. I get it he's not the same player he was a couple of years ago. But when you put two rookies out there at linebacker, right, that's a big, big problem. Linebackers are they're all important, obviously, but linebackers are a very important position on the defense, especially from a communication standpoint. And if you got two guys out there, Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight, by the way, neither one of them a first-round pick, I mean, you're really rolling the dice there doing that, and I'm sure Logan Wilson's incredibly frustrated and ticked off. I get you want to put Barrett Carter out there more, fine. You want to put Logan Wilson out there less, fine. But that was a complete switch. That was Logan Wilson, you are out. Barrett Carter, you are in. There is no rotation there. And look, I'm not going to say that they have more success there. In the second half, if Logan Wilson's out there, I get they wanted to play a little bit quicker. Maybe they thought that, Barrett Carter gives him a little bit more juice, which maybe he does. But from a communication and a leadership standpoint, that's one of your captains out there, and you're taking him out of the game, especially after you played really good defense there in the first half. It kind of makes me scratch my head a little bit, and I have some issues there with that. But obviously the defense wasn't good enough in the second half. Jordan Love made all the right plays. They got Tucker Kraft, right? He wasn't a guy that had a ton of catches in the game, but you could argue he had the biggest catch there on that touchdown. And, it was just kind of like, if they could have just got one stop, you feel like you have a chance there in the second half. They're not able to do it. But back to the offensive side, really impressive stuff offensively there, even after that point where it's like, it felt like Green Bay had kind of taken control of the game. You go back and respond. You execute on fourth down once again. And really impressed with what Joe Flacco was able to do. The fourth down play to Jamar, they were talking after the game where it was like that wasn't what was called. They kind of just freelanced that a little bit there on the side. They were able to get on the same page. Flacco threw a good enough ball, and that's just Jamar Chase being the best receiver in the National Football League, because that was absolutely unbelievable. And again, something I do want to mention there in that spot, look, I'm not the biggest analytic guy. Like, I'm a big eye test guy. I'm a big feel guy, which maybe that makes me a little bit too old school. But I do love going for two if you're down 14 and then you cut it to 8, because that really can apply pressure a lot quicker than if you just kick the extra point. Because if you just kick the extra point, the opposition's like, we still have the lead, like we're still chilling. But if you can get it to 6 points, 6 points and 7 points, that feels like a totally massive difference there in that spot. Credit to Zach Taylor for doing that. Credit to Joe Flacco for extending and making the play there on the 2 point. Then you're sitting there like, oh, here we go. We got an opportunity here in this game. And then, obviously you got Barrett Carter kind of makes a mistake there on that drive. Does Logan Wilson not make that mistake? I don't know. They kick a field goal, and that pretty much ices it there in that spot. And even after that, you saw some productivity there with Joe Flacco moving the ball. And, it's fourth down, 56-yard field goal. I mean, when the field goal went through, the game was probably over. Taylor makes the right call there in that fourth down spot, send out McPherson. He's unable to make it. And, you're in victory formation there if you're the Green Bay Packers. Concerned with Evan McPherson? No, I wouldn't say that, right? Has he missed a kick that he should make all year? No. He had a big kick earlier in the game. He missed from 67 and 57. I'm not hitting the panic button there at all with Evan McPherson. It feels like he is back, and certainly better than he has been these past 2 years. But he also hasn't been in a ton of high-leverage, high-pressure situations. We'll see how he executes should those moments arise later in the year. So ultimately, complimentary football. It wasn't played well enough in the game for Cincinnati. No Trey Hendrickson. That injury hurt bad. As of, we're sitting here live doing this show. Don't have an update on, the status of his back. Those back injuries, they can linger. That obviously isn't good. And, Gesicki had the pec, and he was ruled out very quickly. So to me, that is not a good sign there at all for Mike Gesicki. But with no Joe Burrow, they haven't really found a way to get Gesicki involved with what they're trying to do offensively here over the course of the past few weeks. But those are the two injuries there for Cincinnati. And at the end of the day, we can sit here and try to spin it as positive as we want to. And I do believe, as we'll continue to touch on here, that's what we should be doing here in this spot. But you look at the numbers, and it's 79-9 in the first halves over the course of the past 4 weeks. Right, these losses 79-9. Obviously, it was 69-9 coming into this game against Green Bay. You lose 10-0, 79-9. It's just can't happen. That's downright disgusting, and it can't happen. And at the end of the day, we can sit there and feel good about, finally they were able to get a drive going there and attempt a 67-yard field goal. You did nothing on offense there in the first half. The only thing you did well was didn't turn the football over, and ultimately that's what allowed you to stay in the game. And ultimately, that's why you made the trade for Joe Flacco there in that spot. The drive there in the second half to start it after getting the ball. Good job by Taylor, by the way, deferring, getting the ball to start the second half. That was critical. But after that, you're able to pick up some good things, right? After those 4 drives, you have a stretch where you got 5 consecutive possessions that are going into Packer territory, 19 first downs, 18 points. You can win. You absolutely can win when things are going that way. Also, another note, kind of more of a split with Samaje Perine and Chase Brown. I like Chase Brown. I think he can be a really good back, but the Bengals right now need guys that can run through tackles at the line of scrimmage, right? Because they're getting hit immediately, and Perine gives you more of an opportunity to do that than Chase Brown. It'll be interesting to see as time goes on if that continues to be split. Again, I don't think this is really a knock on Chase Brown. It's just the style of runner that they need right now because they can't run block for Cincinnati. Dalton Reisner settled in as the game went on. Obviously, that was another storyline that we had in mind. Dylan Fairchild wasn't able to play. Lucas Patrick, by the way, did not play after practicing a little bit this week. They went with Reisner and the rookie again, Jalen Rivers. Thought he had some good moments there. Orlando Brown Jr. continued to have some bad moments. At left tackle for Cincinnati, and Amarius Mims got banged up, and you had to bring in Cody Ford, late into that game. So that's another injury that you need to monitor there as well. Amarius Mims, there was a couple of times there earlier in that game when both your tackles are supposed to be your guys are both getting beat, and you got a 40-year-old back there. That just absolutely cannot happen in the game for Cincinnati. So overall takeaways, I think there really is reason to be optimistic. And if you sit there and disagree with me, you're wrong. I get the frustration of losing 4 straight games. I get the expectation is not just to cover a 14.5-point spread and go in there and try to win. I totally get that, and I relate to that, and I agree with that. But going in there against what I believe, despite the record, is one of the best teams in the National Football League on the road at Lambeau, with a 40-year-old quarterback that just got there on a Tuesday, I don't think he really could have expected much more in this situation. Maybe a couple more first downs on that in the first half would have been nice. But overall, Joe Flacco was about as good as you could have hoped for. I think he didn't make any mistakes, didn't turn the football over. Did he, miss a couple of reads? Yeah, maybe. Did a great job of not taking sacks, right? He threw the ball away. And with this team, man, you can't get behind the sticks with what you've got going at that offensive line spot. When it wasn't there, he threw it away, something Jake Browning hasn't done good enough there as well. So I do think there is reason to be optimistic for this team. However, the sense of urgency has to be through the roof here. All right, it has to be through the roof because you're in a short week here against the Pittsburgh Steelers, Thursday Night Football, and that kind of was the warm-up game. We alluded to this last week on the show as well, where it felt like, this game, you make the trade for Flacco, you bring him in for Green Bay. That's kind of the warm-up routine, right? The audition, so to speak, of trying to get things going and, probably not going to win the game, but try to get comfortable and see what you have. And I think that, for the most part, went according to plan. I really do. Now, the coaches, as I mentioned at the top of the show, the coaches and players can't go out there and say, oh, yeah, we weren't really expecting to win. We just needed to see some positive things go in the right direction. I get it, but for us, we can sit here and be realistic and say that, there wasn't much of a chance they would win. They just needed to show that they are better with Joe Flacco than they are with Jake Browning. They clearly are. That isn't a debate whatsoever. And now it's go time, because I'm not going to sit here and call the Pittsburgh game a must-win, but 2-5, 5 straight losses, you're in a tough spot. And then it's definitely, must-win going into the bye against 2 teams you should beat anyway, in the Jets and the Bears. But if you win this, to stay alive in this situation, some people would argue, say you need to win out going into the bye, beat Pittsburgh, the Bears, and the Jets going in. I don't think necessarily you have to do that. Obviously, that would be great. But if you don't go 2-1 going into the bye, that's it. And that means we're probably not going to see Joe Burrow for the rest of the year. That's just kind of where we're at. It's already that's what happens when you lose 4 games in a row in the National Football League. It gets desperate. It gets desperate fast because you can't lose 5 games in a row. That just absolutely can't happen. So I'm not going to, even having said that, I'm not going to say it's 100% a must-win for, Cincinnati here on Thursday. We've talked about it a lot on the show. I think that's in sports talk. People love saying, oh, it's a must-win game. Let's pump the brakes there on that a little bit, but you do have to go 2-1 at the worst going into the bye in a few weeks. So that was kind of the opportunity to get in the swing of things, get hit a few times, acclimate a little bit to what, a new team and all that. Now it's go time against a team in which Joe Flacco's had a lot of success against. By the way, we keep sitting here and saying, Pittsburgh's going to falter. They're going to end up around 500 like they always do. I get it's the Cleveland Browns, but you look up and this Steelers team only has 1 loss. So, if you lose this game and Baltimore, we'll talk about them later in the show. They're a mess. Pittsburgh is in a situation where if they win, they're just kind of coasting to an AFC North title, right? So it's a big game in the jungle on Thursday, and certainly hope, the home crowd in Cincinnati shows up and shows out. There's going to be a lot of Steelers fans, as there always is, even with Joe Burrow playing. But it's got to be dominated by orange and black. That better be something that is achieved on Thursday night, and there better be some newfound confidence and hope in this team, because I think they definitely brought that on Sunday. But no more time to mess around. It's got to translate to some wins on the scoreboard, and it's a big one on Thursday. It is an absolute massive game as they try to, the season's on life support right now, and that might be putting it nicely, to be completely honest with you. And hopefully they can find a way to get it done and pull out a victory. We'll obviously talk about it at length throughout the week. But overall, not good enough to win against a really good team, a team that I believe is a true Super Bowl contender. But they're in the second half, reason to be optimistic. If you just get one stop on defense, right, play a little bit more of a complementary style of football, you have a chance there. And I think we're all got our fingers crossed here with Trey Hendrickson, because you could say what you want about him, but I think I'm not going to sit here and say they win the game if he doesn't get hurt, but I don't think that would be crazy to say, to be completely honest with you. So hopefully, we'll be all monitoring that news very closely, and hopefully he's going to be able to go on Thursday night. But short week with him back, we'll see. Definitely is a tough guy, but they certainly missed him there in the second half.